Yo, what up, friends? So, today I've come to talk to you about my cast on crit Ice Spear Occultist spinning all around in a circle, shooting out your white spears of ice death. Yes, ice death. That is a word we're using. Now you can see playing before you, I have a couple of video clips that are going to be going through and just showcasing a bunch of different bosses and different kills, and the character itself is just a whole lot of fun. The idea behind it is a witch that ascends into an occultist that uses the cast on crit mechanic, and as she spins and her swords hit and she casts a crit, or she hits with a crit because every attack crits, she shoots out these white balls of doom and death. Dude, it's fun. It's fun just watching the clips now play before you. Just like the character itself is out of this world fantastic. I tried to really catch and represent like the whole idea of an ice switch with the thumbnail, and I hope you guys like it. I'm taking a lot of the advice that you guys are giving me with the thumbnails, and we're trying to put that forward and see if we can maintain this style if we're going to go back to the old one. So let me know in the comments down below what you think, and if you want me to keep doing these. So far the outcome has been pretty positive, and I'll do my best to keep pumping these out. But before we really get into the character and the build, and as you see just how it plays via the clips playing now, I just want to say a big thank you to the community. You guys just helping put together all of these characters and help me make these videos. Like, you guys are the real MVPs, and I wouldn't be here without you. And I want to say a big shout out to Turtle and Tao for spending a bunch of crazy late nights working on the cast on crit Ice Spear and the cast on crit Blazing Salvo, which is another video coming out in the future. And honestly, you guys have been great, and I'm truly honestly appreciative of all the help and just everything that's gone into it. So now, looking at the gear and looking at the video and looking at everything, we're just gonna kind of go over everything that makes this work and makes this tick. And then closer towards the end of the video, we'll go over the POB and kind of talk about it a little bit more. But let's jump into it. So if we click on over back to our game and we look at the character and the gear, she just looks awesome. Yes, it is a Mageblood build. Yes, it has a Ring of Calandra. Yes, the weapon and shield have influence on them. It is very expensive. If you take any cast on crit character on POE Ninja and you throw it into POB, they all pretty much do the same thing. 100 bajillion damage, 0 survivability at all, and cost literally a mortgage payment. Not literally like actual cash, but like every divine and mirror in the world. This is no exception to that, except the fact that I've worked on defenses a little bit, and I've tried to make it a little bit more tankier and deal a lot more damage. Though POB, we'll get there. But let's talk about what makes it tick, what makes it work, and how it all comes together. The basic concept of the character is that we are going to use a Divergent Cyclone to spin around, which you've seen. We spin. Our Cyclone crits, which triggers Awakened Cast on Crit support. That triggers our Phantasmal Ice Spear. Phantasmal Ice Spear shoots out and hits the enemies, and pretty much everything blows up. Now, you've seen in the videos that we're playing, the character just deletes and incinerates all the content, all the bosses, and it does a really good job of being the best Blood Aquaducts farmer on the market. You cannot, for a better bang for your dollar, find a build that will clear Blood Aquaducts and make you all of the humility cards that you have ever asked for. Now, just to kind of show you guys a little bit more, if I hit, every hit, no matter what, will fire out Ice Spear, and those Ice Spears will return, and they will deal damage, and so forth and so on. But how does it all work? How does it all come together? What is the whole bread and butter? So what is it that makes it tick? What is it that makes it work, and how does it come together? We understand it's Cyclone, we understand it's cast on crit, but to really kind of put it all together, we have to go over all the gear and the POB and understand the 100 millions of interactions that are making it work together. Now, I pretty much started out with the idea that I wanted to play cast on crit. I started out with the idea that I wanted to play Ice Spear, and I started looking at different things and wanted to incorporate Crucible in what I was doing. Now, I mentioned earlier that majority of the cast on crit builds are made of glass cannons, and I didn't want to be a glass cannon, so this thing has 81,000 armor, 79 all res, positive chaos resistance, ailment immunity, and it's pretty good. But I had to get there, and I got there thanks to Crucible, because Crucible was really the cream of the crop that helped put this all together. Now we'll go over each piece individually and it all starts to make sense. We're going to look at our weapon. We're going to look at Cospris Malice, which is our jeweled foil. The influence on the weapon does not matter. It's just there to look cool. Cospris is a sword that we're going to use that says trigger a socketed spell on melee critical strike with a 0.25 second cooldown. Pretty much that means every time that I spin with my cyclone and hit, Cospris will trigger all of the gems inside of it. Cospris deals no physical damage. It is all elemental damage. It has increased attack speed and critical strike chance against chilled enemies. Because we're a cold variant, we pretty much chill all the time. We do a bunch of things with frost damage, and everything is always either frozen, chilled, slowed down, or just not moving and probably just dead. Now, my Cospris has influence on it because I wanted to make the Cospris using Crucible, and I did some very cool things with the Crucible tree. Node 1, I did 40% increased global damage with 10% increased cost of skills. We negate the cost of skills with all of our gear and the Mageblood, which we'll cover later. We take iron reflexes. We convert all of our evasion rating to armor. I'm not a huge fan of the dodge and only dodge and pray to dodge, but if I have to use evasion, I use evasion. But if I can convert it to armor, I'd rather convert it to armor. We take projectiles pierce an additional target because we want our ice spear to pierce as many targets as possible and to turn into second form, which we'll cover later when we get the ice spear. We take reduced skill down effect, or reduce skill effect duration and increase cooldown recovery rate. The entire build works around CDR. And then lastly, we take knockback direction with Cyclone, and sweep is reverse. So we have the ability to suck in all of our enemies towards us and pretty much deal a lot of damage. I know there's one guy already raising his hand but saying, Psy Spear second phase! I've thought of that, don't worry. In our Cospris, we're going to have our anomalous frostbite. We use anomalous because it gives us increased effect of our curse. We have frostbite in the Cospris, so the Cospris automatically cast frostbite for us. We have power charge on crit, so that when we attack and we crit, we have more crit chance and more crit damage, and skills deal more damage per power charge. We have 11 power charges, so we deal a bajillion damage. And we have divergent creeping frost. We use divergent, so it fires 2 additional projectiles. And just creeping frost itself is very, very, very strong. You're going to notice a running theme with this build with a lot of alt quality gems because we pair it with ashes. Now, the weapon goes really well in hand with the shield simply because of the Crucible tree on the shield. Now, I mentioned we were tanky because of iron reflexes, and we're also going to be tanky a little bit because of the shield as well. Our shield is giving us 40% increased cold damage, so just a base extra 40% damage. At the downside of minus 10% cold resist, we're capped on our resistances, so it doesn't matter. We get +2 to all maximum resistances, -5 to our maximum chaos resist. We're not really close to chaos res cap. Even if we were close, 71% is still more than acceptable for chaos resistance. We get 100% chance to avoid being shocked. We pair this with Storm Shroud, and our shield gives us full immunity with the Storm Shroud jewel. We get +1 to our maximum power charges, so our shield is going to give us the ability to get extra power charges, which puts us at the 11 marker. And lastly, the big thing that ties everything together with the power of everything is Ice Spear and Ball Lightning projectiles return to you. Now, it was easier to see in the Blood Aquaducts, and some of the videos that we were playing kind of showcased the Ice Spear returning to you. But pretty much this makes it so that Ice Spear attacks, you spin, you crit, you attack, Ice Spear goes out. Ice Spear goes into second form. Ice Spear deals a ton of damage in second form, and it comes back in second form. Now, we've talked about Ice Spear. We're mentioning Ice Spear, and people are raising their hands. So let's talk about the 6th link that ties everything together. I know about the Prism Guardian. We're going to come back to it in a second when we get to our defenses. The Shav's armor that we're using has our Divergent Cyclone in it. We use Divergent for more movement speed. Cyclone is how we trigger all of our spells. Divergent lets us move faster. Speed is king. Now, that's paired with Awaken Cast on Crit. Awaken Cast on Crit essentially is the thing that makes everything work. We have a level 10 Awaken Cast on Crit. We have 27 or 37% increased cooldown recovery rate, 20% increased spell critical strike chance. Our supported skills deal more damage, and they have a cooldown, or they trigger on a cooldown of 0.15 or 0.15. So pretty much every time we Cyclone, we attack, we crit, we trigger, and that happens every 0.15 seconds. The spell that we're triggering is Phantasmal Ice Spear. Now, Phantasmal Ice Spear we have at level 24. We use Phantasmal versus the other ones because we have the ability to pierce on our weapon. If we didn't have the ability to pierce on our weapon, we would be using the alt quality form for Ice Spear to pierce more enemies. But since we have it on our weapon, we can use Phantasmal Ice Spear. And the real upside of Phantasmal Ice Spear is it says reduce distance before changing forms. Now, if you don't know anything about Ice Spear, what makes that really, really, really strong is that when Ice Spear fires, it deals a flat amount of damage. It fires an additional projectile, but as it travels, it changes form. Pretty much when it goes into second form, it has a 600% increased critical strike chance. Second form has plus 53% crit strike multiplier and 300% more projectile speed. So we hit, Ice Spear starts, it starts as a really thin line, it changes form after it does a little bit of traveling, it thickens, it becomes really wide, it shoots out, and it comes back in second form. So it hits the enemy, pierces, does a bunch of damage, hits second form, does damage, come back, hits in second form, does damage. Now, I had mentioned that we have the ability with our Cyclone to suck in, and that usually makes it very difficult for Ice Spear in the second form. But because we're using Phantasmal, that's not a big problem and no issues at all. Now we're going to pair and tie everything together with Divergent Inspiration. Divergent Inspiration is the thing that makes it work, as it reduces the mana cost of the skill and gives us pretty much just a ton of extra crit. So we know now, recapping, that our weapon fires an additional projectile. Our weapon offers us cooldown recovery rate. We use cooldown recovery rate to trigger the cast on crit. We suck in all the enemies. We have iron reflexes to take less damage. We deal 40% more damage. We have an extra power charge. Our attacks go out and come back in. We're ailment immune. We have extra resistances. We get 40% more cold damage. And that's the basic gist of it. Spin around, deal a ton of damage, have your projectiles come back, and boom, everything's dead. So looking at the gear, we looked at Cospris. Our Shavs, we'll start with the Shavs. Our Shavs gives us a ton of energy shield. It gives us faster recharge of energy shield. It gives us lightning resistance. And the most important part of the Shavs is it says chaos damage taken does not bypass energy shield, which is why we want to have chaos resistance so that our energy shield protects our life pool being 39 because we're on the life. And Shavs pretty much is a very strong centerpiece of this build, as it gives us the ability to not die. Something you'll notice that's very important is our Shavs has +1 socketed gems on it. The +1 corrupted Shavs this league was not very expensive. It was actually on the cheaper end. I want to say it was about 15 divines at 6 link corrupted. And we need the +1 level of socketed gems to put our awaken cast on crit to level 10 to give us the 37% cooldown recovery rate, to pair that with the weapon to give us the 15%, to put us at the magical number of 52 to make our triggers work, which we'll talk about again when we get to the POB. If you are watching this and you're looking at the gear and you're looking at the Shavs, note you need the +1 on the Shavs, or you need to figure out where you're going to get the missing CDR from, which we'll talk about later. Pairing off back onto the shield, our shield has +2 level of socketed aura gems. Our shield lets us socket gems cost and reserve life instead of mana. Our socketed gems have increased RMR. We get Dex and all resistance on the shield. If you want and you're ballsy, you can double corrupt the shield and risk the Crucible tree and the shield itself and try to get +4, but I was not there. And our shield, we're going to put Divergent Hatred, which is going to give us 20% of physical damage as extra cold damage. You and nearby allies are going to deal 19% more cold damage, and you and nearby allies have 25% increased movement speed while on shield ground. Creeping Frost leaves shield ground. That's a combo. That's a combo. We're going to use Divergent Determination to gain a metric ton of armor. The Divergent, because it gives us 5% of evasion rating as extra armor. We're going to be using Zealotry. Zealotry gives us 10% chance to create consecrated ground on hitting a rare unique enemy lasting 8 seconds. You and nearby allies have 5% crit multi. You and nearby allies have 42% spell critical strike chance and more spell damage. Nama's Zealotry is insane. Absolutely insane. Our shield is really important because it lets us reserve all of our auras on life, and that is actually really important. So we have Hatred, Determination, and Zealotry. You'll notice right here, it goes on our life, and that's how we fit in all the extra auras. So the shield gives us life reservation on our auras, so we can fit our 350% auras on our life pool. Our shabs gives us the ability for chaos damage to not bypass energy shield. Our shield gives us ailment immunity, more power charges. I know I keep recapping everything, because it's really important that you understand how all of this ties together, and we're going to keep moving on. Now we're going to look at our helmet. Our helmet gives us aspect of the spider. If you don't know what aspect of the spider is, let me give you let me explain it. While active, periodically applies a spider's web debuff to nearby enemies and hinders them. Each spider's web on enemies increases the damage they take. Hinder reduces their movement speed. Hinder pretty much slows them down, makes them take a ton of damage. 3 webs pretty much explains itself. The aura itself is really strong and really powerful, both as an offensive and defensive layer. Slowing down enemies is really strong and really good. We put Grace. Now, we mentioned earlier, our weapon has iron reflexes, so we convert all of our evasion to armor. So we have determination. We have Grace. Grace gives us a bunch of evasion. Divergent determination converts 5% of that to armor. So that's a combo. We're going to be using discipline, as discipline is going to give us a metric ton of energy shield, and it's pretty much our entire life pool. So we want to scale up discipline as high as we can. We use Val discipline so that we can activate the Val side. The Val side immediately starts our recharge. It's pretty much having a health potion that just pretty much starts and keeps ticking and starts. We tie everything together with anomalous precision at level 21. We need it at 21 because otherwise we don't have enough precision or accuracy to hit everything all the time. And if you're hitting and not attacking and connecting, you're not triggering and you're not critting and you're not casting and you deal no damage. So you need the precision, or you need to find accuracy somewhere, and it is a lot of accuracy. We use anomalous precision because the anomalous side gives us increased reservation efficiency, which helps us fit it in, because if we didn't have that, the reservation cost for 21 would be astronomical. Now, you've noticed once again, we have a lot of gems both in the shield, the helmet, the weapon, the chest that have alt qualities. We pair this with Ashes. Ashes is giving us 30% quality on all of our skill gems, 20% increased reservation of skills. I do not know if you need a perfectly rolled Ashes. I had a perfectly rolled Ashes because I was using it to delve. You could probably get away with like an 1828 if you're looking to invest in this build. We put on our Ashes infused for +1 maximum power charge. If you're having mana problems, you can pretty much allocate any RMR node that we haven't taken on the trade, and that should help. Which I think you can get Champion of the Cause is the big one that we don't have. Where is it? Champion of the Cause. Yep, you can grab Champion of the Cause. If you have a really well rolled Ashes and a lot of the gear pretty much matched to what I have, you shouldn't have mana problems. Moving over and looking at our one ring, we have a power charge ring with strength on it. You need the strength to fit in your red gems, so the strength is really important. Global crit multi, which we got from essence spamming, energy shield, chaos resistance, a little extra life, and non-channeling -5. -5 is really important because we want to have our cyclone. Our cyclone costs 1 mana to trigger the inspiration in our armor so that we get inspiration charges. We pair it with the Ring of Calandra. Ring of Calandra mirrors the exact other ring, so we have pretty much just 110 strength, 48% crit multi, 80 energy shield, some number of life, a ton of chaos resistance, and a little bit of, minus mana cost. Ideally, I would like tier 1 chaos resistance. I'm not going to complain. The ring is really well rolled and pretty good. I'm just going to leave it alone, move along. Looking at our gloves, inside the gloves, we have Anomalous Defiance banner. The Anomalous Defiance banner is really good because it pretty much just gives us more armor, more evasion, more energy shield, more everything. Nearby enemies have 40% reduced critical strike chance. Just you and your allies have 37% increased armor. It adds another 12% increased armor and evasion. Like, Anomalous Defiance banner is just actually just bonkers for just 10% reserves mana, and just, I don't know, I use it on everything. It's just out of this world crazy. We pair it with Herald of Ice. Herald of Ice gives us flat cold damage. Damage can't be reflected. On the Herald of Ice, damage can't be reflected. The buff gives us added spell damage, added attack damage, added cold damage, and just Herald Device is just strong. Also, if you have the MTX and you put MTX on Herald Device, it's just beautiful. It's the blue explosions are, they're so good. Divergent Clarity. We have Clarity to help with the mana issues that the build has. And when I say mana issues, I mean the fact that when we attack and we crit and Ice Spear fires, it costs a bunch of mana. In our case, we got it to 0, but some people have it costing mana, and we need the mana regeneration to maintain our Cyclone, maintain our Ice Spear if yours is not 0. And then we also needed to maintain the Frostbite cost, the Creeping Frost cost, and just pretty much everything else that goes alongside, and the Sniper's Mark. We'll get there. So when I attack and I crit and I trigger my Cospris, I trigger Creeping Frost. Creeping Frost has a cost on it. Our Sniper's Mark has a cost on it. Our just everything, a Frostbite has a cost. So we need the mana regeneration from Clarity to pretty much help maintain. Now we only have 167 unreserved mana. And I know some people here are probably saying, well, that's a whole lot of mana. But if I hop into this map really quick and I start cycloning around and I just take off, I'll just put Clarity off really quick. I'll show you. And I take off Clarity, you're going to notice right away that the mana will become a problem when we start hitting rares, as it'll start to hiccup, assuming things don't just die immediately. Okay, so things are dying too fast. It's not a problem in regular maps. It becomes a problem in bosses. Anyways, welcome to dying immediately, because I'm like trying to showcase what I'm trying to talk about and immediately dying. Let's just go back there and just give him a piece of our mind. You little goose. I'm missing an aura now. What am I missing? Why do I have so much unreserved? Oh, okay, whatever. We'll figure it out in a minute. But anyways, that's how that works. No, I do have everything. I just have 167 mana. All right, whatever. Hi, welcome. We're using Divergent Clarity because it gives us increased damage while on full mana. Clarity regenerates our life, regenerates our mana, gives us extra damage. We're never really on full mana. Sometimes you don't need Divergent. Divergent was just cute. Divergent Skitterbots, though, on the other hand, very powerful. Minions have increased chill and shock effect. The minions themselves chill and shock for us. Minions have increased aura effect. They pretty much, Skitterbots are just nuts, man. They also have increased effect of non-damaging ailments on the enemies. They chill, they shock the enemies. Divergent Skitterbots is just cracked. It's cracked. This is very good. Very, very, very good. Very good. Very good. Very good. Our gloves give us a couple of things now. Our gloves give us increased cold exposure on hit, applying minus 16% of cold resistance. So we hit the enemy, they get cold exposure at 16% or negative 16%. Our gloves also give us Unnerve for 4 seconds. Unnerve just adds a ton of damage. Our gloves, very importantly, have accuracy on them. I mentioned earlier, we need accuracy. Accuracy is very, very, very important. You need the accuracy. You can't skip out on the accuracy. Our gloves are temple modded, so they increase damage against chilled enemies. They have cold resistance on them. They're just defensive gloves with energy shield, and mana. And they are tied together with increased elemental damage if you've dealt a critical strike recently. Pretty much crafted on as the Aceling effect. Our gloves are very good. They're very strong. You want them to be defensive while also being offensive. So you really, in the prefixes, want those energy shield rolls. You'll notice our energy shield's only 3,300. I could redo the gloves to be tier 1, and then X. And eventually I'll get around to it. I think we skipped the helmet and what the helmet does. So I'm going to backtrack to the helmet. The helmet grants us the aspect of the spider, which we talked about earlier. The helmet has a bunch of int on it, which we're going to need for something very important that I'll mention later on. It has maximum power charges. Nearby enemies have minus 12 cold resist and plus 1 socketed of AoE gems and aura effect. We put this on a Blizzard Crown because we want the extra cold damage, and we have Ice Spear fires and additional projectiles, so we have a bunch of projectiles. I think our current projectile count right now is 12. Then it comes back and it splits and it does some cool stuff. So it's a lot of damage. A lot of damage. I'm gonna go back while I'm editing this and watch this and be like, you're an idiot. I hope you guys enjoy this. Lastly, looking at our boots. our boots are really strong. Really, really, really strong. Now, normally you would have Redeemer Shaper boots because you need Shaper for increased cooldown recovery rate. Because we put the increased cooldown recovery rate on the weapon, we no longer need it on the boots. Normally you would want 18% on your boots because you don't have the +1 to the shavs and you don't have the 15% here, but because we put the +1 on the shavs and the 15% here, we're able to do something a little bit different. Now, Tailwind, somebody's raising their hand and saying, your breakpoints! Yes, there are breakpoints to cast when damage taken, or cast on crit. There are breakpoints to cast on crit that make it very tight and make it very important that everything works the proper way, which you'll see in the POB. Now, I have factored and placed and done everything perfectly so that Tailwind at 25% increased effect works great. I think the Tailwind you only need 20%, but when I got the boots and they were done, 25% was where they were at, and I was just kind of content. Now, we have Onslaught increased effect, which we also mathed out in our POB, so that's okay. And the big thing that was really important on the boots, we were really shy dexterity, so we managed to find a pair with dex on them, with tier 1 dex. We paid a little bit extra, but we really needed the dex, and the dex was very, very, very important to making sure everything works and ties out. Simply due to the fact that Cospris needs 212 dex, like holy crap. The prefixes of our boots give us elusive. Elusive gives us a chance to avoid all damage from hits, 30% increased movement speed. Elusive is sweet. We have elusive all the time. We attack a billion times a second. Our boots give us a ton of movement speed. Tailwind, onslaught, dex, resistances. Our boots are beautiful. Absolutely, positively beautiful. The last thing, I know you guys have seen it, we have the Mageblood. The Mageblood is enchanted with enemies unnerved by you, have 50% increased spell critical strike chance. Our Mageblood has a ton of dex, a ton of strength, really well rolled resistances, and 4 flasks are just always on. Our flasks are pretty strong. We have a Sapphire Flask with increased effect and reduced mana cost of skills. We have a Jade Flask with increased effect and increased evasion rating. Once again, we use evasion because we convert it to armor. We have a Diamond Flask for a bunch of increased crit because we need crit because we want to always crit with 38% additional elemental resistance. So that pretty much gives us the ability to have all these overcapped resistances. And then we have a Silver Flask, which has onslaught, and we scale our onslaught to the moon with increased effect, and we get our increased critical strike chance, or the rest of our increased critical strike chance from our Silver Flask. Now, looking at all this, this is all the gear. Now, something really cool that I left out on purpose, the gems in the boots. We've seen everything else. We know how it works. We know we have frostbite. We know we deal a ton of damage. We know that Ice Spear is a projectile attack. And I want to talk about something that I was brought to my attention by my buddy Tao and Turtle. Now, if you look at cast on crit builds, you'll usually notice they play with Assassin's Mark. That's to help them cap their crit. But because we cap our crit in other ways, we're using Sniper's Mark. Now, without going into POB and being crazy, the broken down to earth version of what Sniper's Mark does is it says, mark an enemy with Sniper's Mark. Sniper's Mark curses the enemy. They take a bunch of increased damage, 55%. 55% because they get 24% quality from a support, 30% from ashes, 23% base, and it's a level 21 Sniper's Mark from global modifiers. The real kicker to Sniper's Mark, is projectiles which hit first enemies split for 5 additional projectiles. 5. Now, Ice Spear fires an additional projectile. The helmet fires another projectile. That's 2. Awaken GMP is 5. That's 7. And then Sniper's Mark's another 5. That's 12. 12 projectiles go out. 12 projectiles return. 12 projectiles return, hit the enemy, and then split again. So 12 out, 12 in, 12 hit, 12 split. It's like 20 projectile hits. you think about it, right? 12 out, 12 in, 24. They all hit and they all split. So 24 times 5 because they all hit like an Uber boss and they all split 5 times. It's a lot. It's a lot. Now, keep in mind, that is without the amazing curse effect that if you were to play this on a ranger, if I were to do this on a ranger, there'd be like a bajillion% mark effect, and that dude would be like bang, bang, boom, 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 14,000 projectiles. Now, we never want to self-cast our mark, so we have mark on hit. We use the divergent because the divergent mark on hit gives us enemies take 5% increased damage. We pair that with divergent frostlink. It doesn't have to be frostlink. I like frostlink a lot because it just has a ton of increased cooldown recovery rate. It also leaves chilled ground on the floor. Chilled ground plus the hatred gives us the movement speed. It's pretty good. It's pretty good. It's pretty good. It's pretty good. It's a combo. Now you can use Flame Dash instead. You can use Shield Charge. You can use pretty much whatever movement skill that you prefer. And then we have Enhanced Support, which kicks up the Sniper's Mark and pretty much makes things just out of control. So I'll pull up the POB and we'll take a look at the skill tree via the POB. So we are a witch. We are an occultist. We take occultist and we'll talk about occultist first. Occultist gives us forbidden power, which gives us increased area effect per power charge, which for us is okay. It helps with the creeping frost and the cyclone and stuff like that. We get increased damage per power charge. We have 11 power charges. We gain a power charge after spending mana, but we gain power charges from everything else, so that's fine. We get +1 maximum power charges. Forbidden power is very strong. We take Vile Bastion, so we generate 40 energy shield per second. We regenerate 2% of energy shield per second for each enemy you and your minions have killed recently, up to 10%. We cannot be stunned while we have energy shield. Getting stunned with Cyclone feels bad. Like, real bad. Void Beacon gives the enemies minus cold resistance. Frigid Wake says that we cannot be chilled or frozen. We deal more cold damage, and we pretty much just freeze things all the time, and they're always chilled, and they're just always taking a bunch of extra damage. Occultist is really sweet for this build and this type. You can do this on Ranger and be a Deadeye, but we did it as Occultist. Now, if we look at the Ranger tree, we're going to be taking Pain Attunement. We're always on low life because we reserve a bunch of the auras on our life, and that's really strong. Throat Seeker gives us critical strike multi. The Crit Mastery gives us critical strike chance against unique enemies. Moving on up over here, we have a large cluster, which gives us blanketed snow, which penetrates enemy cold resistance against chilled enemies. We always chill, so we're always penetrating. Prismatic Heart and widespread destruction. We're going to take Prismatic Heart, which gives us 10% LE resistance and 30% LE damage. We're not going to path into widespread destruction. You'll notice that we have a medium cluster jewel that gives us Eye to Eye and Repeater, or Eye to Eye and Streamline. Streamline gives us projectile speed and projectile damage. Eye to Eye gives us projectile damage, and projectiles deal 35% increased damage with hits against nearby enemies. We put our Storm Shroud in this cluster. Storm Shroud makes us ailment immune, tied together with our shield since we're shock immune. Shock applies to all ailments, and we're just ailment immune. Our Storm Shroud also has Corrupted Blood. Yes, I know if you go looking, these are very expensive. You can get a Viridian Jewel that has Corrupted Blood on it, Mythic Orbit, and pray it turns into a Storm Shroud if you like gambling. We have a Megalomaniac. You do not need this Megalo. I found this Megalo. It was pretty good. The Megalo gives us another Blanketed Snow. Energy from Naught, which is just a bunch of flat energy shield, and we get Grace, Armour, and all resistance. You would probably want to change this Megalo out for a small cluster that gives you Armour for Grace. Also, if you're having problems where your Ashes isn't rolled very well, you could also put the Megalomaniac as a small cluster with increased effect and mana reservation. Moving down the passive tree, we're going to be taking Leadership for increased area effect of our aura skills, which really only doesn't do anything, but it gives us increased effect of non-curse auras and increased mana reservation on the small nodes and increased effect of non-curse auras. We need a lot of mana reservation, so this node is really good. The Reservation Mastery is also giving us +1 to all maximum elemental resistance if we have both reserved life and mana, which we do. We take this Jewel Socket for Unnatural Instinct. our natural instinct has stuff on it, doesn't it? It does. We have increased effect of non-damaging elements. You don't need it. I just happen to have it. It was pretty cool. That's the wrong build. This one. Okay. Moving over, we have Intuitive Leap. Our Intuitive Leap has increased mana reservation of skills. You need a lot of Armour on this builder. Reservation efficiency of skills. A lot. So, if you're not going to use a small cluster, you have to make it up in other places. I make it up on some of my unique jewels. We take the Intuitive Leap to save 3 points right here so that we can get the Reservation Mastery and Charisma. Charisma for the Armour and the non-Cursora. The small node for the Armour effect. Moving over, we take Foresight. Foresight just gives us more energy shield, maximum energy shield. The energy shield mastery regenerates energy shield per second. We come up here. We have a rational doctrine. We have this because our intelligence is so high that we put profane ground down. Profane ground gives us increased critical strike chance against enemies. So if I go over here and I click this, our enemies have minus 10% to all resistance and 100% increased critical strike chance to be critically hit, or 100% increased chance to be critically hit. This works both for attacks and spells. This is a very good and important thing in how we get crit cap. So without this, you might have a hard time getting crit cap. Moving on up, we'll touch on the large cluster in a second. Coming over here, we take Discipline of the Forbidden for a minimum power charge on kill, and increased damage per power charge. The small nodes give us crit multiplier power charge and crit strike chance per power charge and mana regeneration per power charge. 11 power charges, a lot of effects from these. The mana mastery going down from here gives us more Armour reserve mana effect. We get Deep Thoughts for increased maximum mana regeneration and int, and more max mana. Like I said, we want a lot of int to be higher than everything else, which isn't very hard, but we want to scale it pretty much to the moon. We get instability for a power charge, and we take another Thread of Hope. This Thread of Hope is a large ring, once again with Armour on it that we can make up with a small cluster. And we want the Thread of Hope so that we can get a couple of things. We take Heart of Ice for 30% increased cold damage. Damage penetrates 6% cold resistance. We're going to grab Essence Surge for 30 to maximum energy shield, 20% faster cast or faster start of energy shield. And we're going to take Arcane Focus for more energy shield. Pretty much the Thread of Hope is to get us pretty good notables that just give us more energy shield for cheap without having to take an entire wheel, while also being able to take cold pen and more cold damage. You do not need the Thread of Hope. You could put these points elsewhere. These points just give you more energy shield. If you really wanted to, you could put all the points into melding. You could put all the points into life and energy shield here. But pretty much this was really good bang for your buck. Moving back over, we have the large cluster jewel with Blanketed Snow, Prismatic Heart, and Widespread Destruction again. We're going to take mediums with Basics of Pain and Pressure Points. Basics of Pain and Pressure Points give you increased critical strike chance. We're going to put a Abyss Jewel with this cluster that gives us accuracy rating, crit multi-energy shield. The accuracy was really needed. Without the accuracy on the Searing Eye Jewel, we were not accuracy capped with everything else going on, so we really needed this. Is it Cyclone, I think? Yes. See, effective hit chance 97%. With this, we go to 98, and then we get the rest of it from everything else. We were at 100%. I don't know, we're at 98, but we were at 100. I'll figure it out. Our medium cluster jewel is Eye to Eye and Streamline. Unless the precision wasn't here. Is it the precision? I don't know. I'll figure it out. We have Eye to Eye and Streamline. This gives us, once again, increased projectile damage and projectile damage and speed. We pair it with a Watcher's Eye. Our Watcher's Eye has critical strike chance while affected by hatred. Block attack damage with determination. You don't need that. That's a bonus. Energy shield per hit while affected by discipline. That's pretty needed for sustaining. So the Watcher's Eye pretty much is 2-mod. It's hatred discipline. We take Arcane Potency and this whole wheel for a bunch of critical strike chance and the critical strike mastery, or the critical mastery for +3 level of all critical support gems. This is how we get our Awakened Cast on crit to level 10. So we take Sovereignty in the whole wheel for a bunch of reserve mana effect and non-cursor effect. I was working my way towards 100. This is a floating point that you could pretty much put wherever you want. We take Inner Conviction off of Militant Fate. Inner Conviction gives us more spell damage per power charge. That comes off of Militant Fate. The Militant Fate, we want reduced mana cost of skills and increased non-curse aura effect, and we get another maximum power charge. That's the tree. That's the build. Pretty straightforward. Now we're going to come back and we're going to touch on the Unnatural Instinct. The Unnatural Instinct we put this way. Unnatural Instinct says all allocated small passive skills and radius grant nothing. Grants all bonuses of unallocated skills. So we're pretty much getting reduced mana cost of link skills, which do nothing, increased cast speed, which pretty much does nothing, more spell damage and int, and attack speed and accuracy and life and movement speed and attack speed. Now we path this way because if we change the amount of attack speed we have, if you look here at our attack rate, if I do this and I lose attack rate and I go to my Ice Spear, our trigger rate is busted. Now, we're going to take 1 second and talk about trigger rate. Cast on crit works as follows. Trigger rate wants to be 10 attacks per second. 10.10 to be exact is the perfect trigger rate due to the amount of cooldown recovery rate that we have. So we want to get attack speed high enough to hit 10.1 and not go over. If we have too little attack rating, our trigger rate is bad. So if you notice right here, our attack rate is 10.09. Our Ice Spear trigger rate is 10.10. If I were to go to the tree and I were to add attack speed, more attack speed, we would be attacking too fast, and the trigger rate for our damage, as you can see, goes down. Cast on crit is a very delicate build where you have to balance your attacks with your cooldown. To get more attack speed, I need more cooldown recovery rate, and I need to hit the next breakpoint of 128%. Pretty much unobtainable. So 52% or 54% is the 54 is the magic number. And it's the same thing with the Cospris. The Cospris was factored in to give us increased attack speed at 13%. Very important that it's at 13 and not 14 and not 12 for my variation of it. Same thing with the boots for the Tailwind at the increased effect of Tailwind to make it work. The extra effects from the Onslaught. Everything has to be tied together perfectly to hit this magic attack rating breakpoint. Otherwise, the build will not work. If you are trying to copy this build and replicate it and do everything and it doesn't work, open POB, go to your calculation or your configurations, make sure everything's checked the way that you see it here. Refer back to this video, spiderwebs. And just make sure it's all targeted and on. And if your attack rate and trigger rate doesn't match, then you need to figure out what your attack speed is and if it's too high or too low. Very important. Very important. Now, we had mentioned earlier about our Ice Spear. If we include Ice Spear in the full DPS, you'll notice that on Pinnacle bosses, our Ice Spear in second form. Oh, wow. One projectile does 9 million. If I do second form all projectiles, it says it's at 72 million. If I double my projectile count and go to 12, like we have, 12 go out, 12 come back, it says it's 861 million. And that's not including the sniper's mark that pretty much adds another 5. And they split and those attack and come back. So if we have 12 out and 12 back in, it's technically 24. It's like 1.7 billion. But we're not going to like do weird POB numbers. We're going to say 12 projectiles go out, 12 projectiles come back in at 861 million DPS. On Uber bosses, that comes out to roughly 253 million going out and coming back in before those attacks hit and split and sniper's mark. There's a lot of damage very fast. You saw in the Sirius clip earlier and all the boss clips, it pretty much killed everything immediately. So sniper's mark's really good and just a lot of damage. And I highly encourage you, if you're going to try this build, to try to cap your crit and use sniper's mark instead of assassin's mark. I know assassin's mark's really good, but I would say that sniper's mark's a lot better. Now, on Uber bosses, we only have 12,000 effective hit pool. On regular Guardian bosses, we have 13,000 effective hit pool. Our defense is our offense. Freeze them, attack them, blow them up, don't get hit. Cyclone has a lot of range. I know, 80,000 armor, 79 all res, positive chaos res, immediately dies. There's no spell suppression, that's the problem. No spell suppression. If you're looking to see how to do the bosses, you can watch my last video about how to kill Shaper. You can find it in the channel down below, and that'll show you how to do the bosses. If you have any questions about the build itself, don't hesitate to leave a comment down below. I know this video was a little bit of a long one, but there's a lot of different things to cover and touch on. And if you're thinking about trying cast on crit and you're thinking about running the character and just kind of doing everything, I heavily encourage you to give it a go. The character's a lot of fun. And if you're having trouble making your Crucible tree and you have questions, don't hesitate to ask. We can talk about the Crucible tree and other nodes that you might have or might be considering. But if you give it a go and it works out great, let me know. Coming out soon, I have Cast on Crit Blazing Salvo, which is just a hot mess. Shout outs to Bike Spokes for that one. Bike Spokes for that one. That is awesome. But we'll touch on that in the next video. Friends, thank you for tuning in. And if you made it this far in the video, don't forget to leave a like, comment, subscribe, and do a lot of fun stuff with the algorithm. We'll appreciate you, as so will I. Thank you for all the support again. You guys are great. So long, farewell, and Vita. Have a wonderful evening, friends.